This conference will now be recorded.
Hi all, good morning, good evening. Welcome to the day one session of performance testing JMeter Beginner to Master with Groovy Scripting and Dynatrace integration. So yesterday we had the demo session in which we went through the different the course content. So the different topics which we are going to cover as part of this training. So it is a vast course. It will enable you to learn JMeter from a beginner point of view till the advanced topics. It will make you completely confident to learn JMeter and deliver the performance testing projects. Along with that, the Groovy scripting will also be covered and integration of Dynatrace with JMeter and how to monitor your performance tests with Dynatrace. Okay, so let's proceed for today's session. Let me share my screen. Yeah, so hope my screen is visible. So yesterday we saw these three different events and why they are important, and these three events more relate to the performance of the application, right? Performance of the application. So on these days, the application must respond fast enough so that the users are able to experience better performance. And then I gave some examples of the non-functional requirements. Okay, so like, how are the non-functional requirements? They completely differ from the functional requirements, and you will get requirements like response time of the different application screens should be less than 2 seconds. Application should be able to handle these many concurrent users. Application should able to generate or handle these many transactions per second. Yeah, so the requirements will be in this particular fashion. Now we'll go to the next slide, wherein we will understand about the different terminologies related with performance testing. I'm covering these topics as well so that whoever is not aware of performance testing also, they can get to know about that and then learn JMeter. So we'll be quickly covering the basics of performance testing as part of our course curriculum. So the different terminologies are the common terminologies which you will hear in a performance testing project, here in a performance testing domain. Like, first is virtual user. You will very commonly hear this term known as virtual user. Now, what is a virtual user? So, in functional testing, the functional testers verify the functionality, and there are like 3 or 4 functional testers, let's say, in a team. But as I told you, in performance, we have to verify the application performance with so many different users, right? Whatever is the requirement, like 1000 users, 2000 users. And as I was telling you yesterday, in performance testing, our main objective is to check the speed, the scalability, and the reliability. And all these tests are done with the help of virtual users. We do not have physical users, guys. We do not have physical users. We all have virtual users. Now, what is virtual user means? There is no physical user, but the transactions, the application scenarios are generated or are created or are simulated, right? The scenarios which is in our scope, they are simulated on the performance testing environment with the help of the performance testing tool. So it appears as if some users are conducting the transactions. because they are not real users, they are normally generated by the performance testing tool. That is why we call them as virtual users. Clear all of you? We call them as virtual users. Then response time. Response. What is response? Like when we have any request, right? So normally we have a client and we have a server, let's say, right? So this is my client and this is my server, let's say. So now if I give you an example, so your browser, okay, your browser through which you are accessing the application, that is your client, okay. Then any application you are accessing, let's say Facebook, let's say Amazon, whichever application you are using, those applications are hosted on their servers, right? So how are you accessing? You are trying to launch the application. So when you are launching, what is happening actually? One request, right? One request is going from the client to the server, right? One request is going from the client to the server. The server will understand that, will verify whether it is a valid, valid request or not, whether the server understands that or not. Clear all of you? Whether the server understands that or not, whether the server is able to process that or not, all those things are there. If this is a valid request, the server will accept that request and it will process that request. Once it processes that request, it will send back the response. It will send back the response to the client back again. Okay, it will send back the response to the client. So this is the response. Clear all of you? The request will go from the client. The server will accept that request or reject that request. If it accepts, it will process that request, and then once it is processed in the form of the response, it will send the processed output to the client, and as a result you are able to see the different, let's say you launched Facebook, so you are able to see that page on your browser where you are having the fields to provide your username, password and login. Then once you provide the login details, so that is another request which will go to the server. Once you provide the login details, server will process that, and then if you have provided the correct login credentials, it will land you on the home page or the landing page. So that landing page is again the response to that login request. Are you getting me? So in this fashion, the communication happens between the client and the server. And these data, the data transfer happens in the form of packets. That we all know, right? The data transfer happens in the form of bytes or data packets, right? That we all know. So virtual user, we understood. Response time. So means as I told you, the data transfer happens in the form of packets. Now when the request goes from the client to the server or the response comes back from the server to the client, when the request will go, right, the time at which the first byte gets transferred in the request, and then the server processes that, and then when the response comes back, the time taken for the first byte, okay, the time taken for the first byte of the response to reach the server, so that time plus server processing time is your response time. Okay, clear all of you? Server will process your request, the time taken to process that request, plus the time taken for the first byte of the response to reach from the server to the client. The summation will be your response time. Then throughput. What is throughput, guys? Okay, what is throughput? Throughput means, now as I told you, the request goes, server processes that, it sends back the response. So throughput is nothing but the amount of data transferred per second in the response. Okay, in the response, the amount of data transferred from the server to the client, that is throughput, or basically the amount of when the request or the hits per second or the hits are going to the server processes them, and the amount of data getting processed and sent back to the server of the client is known as the throughput. Then the request, as I told you, that is the hits. Request is nothing but hits, whatever is going from the client to the server, that is a request. Then the number of hits, number of transactions or number of requests processed by the server, number of requests processed by the server is normally called as transactions per second, or it is also the throughput, guys, sometimes. So if the application performance is fast, the number of transactions per second will be higher. If the transactions per second is lower, then the performance of the application is lower. Clear, all of you? Are all of you clear?
Yes.
Yeah. Any queries, anyone till now? Anyone, any queries till now? Then I'll come to iteration. I'll come to iteration. So whenever you are doing any transaction, let's say you logged in into Amazon and you are trying to book a product. So you will search that product and you will book that product. Now as a normal user, let's say you have to buy only one product, so you will search that product and purchase that product, that is all, right? But when we are doing the performance test, there are different types of tests which I'll come later. So all those tests, they will range from minimum from 1 hour to 48 hours. Okay, your test duration will range from 1 hour to 48 hours. Now do you think searching a product, booking a product will take 1 hour? No, right? It will not take 1 hour. So how are we going to do the performance test, guys, then? Because one transaction is not going to take 1 hour. How will we do that? What will happen, that particular transaction, that booking a product or purchasing a product will keep on happening in a loop. Will keep on happening in a loop. Means one product will be ordered, second product will be ordered, third product will be ordered. Why? Because in performance testing, we are seeing that over a period of time, over some duration, how is the application performance. And your user load, let's say 1000 users or 2000 users, all the users are performing the transactions on the application concurrently. Means at the same time they are performing the transactions. Okay, so that loop of transactions means one transaction is conducted multiple times. Like as I told you, book a product. Now if one user, let's say there is one user also, when the transactions are conducted for 1 hour, so booking a product will keep on repeating. So that repetition, so first time, then second time, then third time, fourth time. So those are known as iterations. Those are known as iteration, guys. Clear all of you what is iteration? Now, when the different transactions are conducted in different loops, each loop is called as a iteration. Then guys, think time. What is think time? Now, whenever you launch any application, you do any transaction, we actually you do in this fashion, like you launch the application, as soon as you see the login page, you provide your login credentials and then you log in into the application, and then as soon as you log in, you navigate to some other page, or in that page you do the transaction, and then you do another transaction quickly without any gap in between. So while talking about that kind of scenario itself, we are becoming breathless. So it is very difficult that you will do the transactions also in that fashion, right? So the point I'm trying to make here is, when we are doing such kind of transactions, or whenever we are using any web application, we normally have some time gap in between the different transactions which we are conducting. I'm not saying that we are having that gap intentionally or knowingly. So knowingly or unknowingly, we have that gap because what happens is we think in between that. Like, what will we do next? We think in between that transactions, what will we do next? Now, as I told, in performance testing, we simulate the user behavior, how the user is going to use the application in production. That is our main objective, to simulate. And during that simulation, we verify the performance of the application, how the application is performing. Clear all of you? One moment, I'm getting a call. Sorry, it was an important call. So intentionally or unintentionally, we are providing that gap in between, right? When we are navigating through the application, or we are conducting different transactions. So we have to simulate that in our production or in our performance test also. In order to simulate that, we give some gap in the time or in between the transactions. That is known as think time. In performance testing terminology, we'll call it as think time. Okay, that is think time. Then we have another term, that is pacing. Now, what is pacing? Now, see, in between the two different transaction, like let's say launch and login. Then login, search product, book product. So these all are my transactions, right? Launch, login, searching a product, booking a product. I'm sorry. So if you give any time gap in between these transactions, like between launch and login, between login and search product, between search product and book product, if you're giving any time gap, sorry, so that will be called as think time. But as I told you, this iteration, guys, right? I told you iteration. If you are giving any time gap between two iterations, okay? If you are giving any time gap between two iterations, that is known as pacing. Okay, that is known as pacing. Then we have the next term, that is the protocol. What is a protocol? So here I told you that the client and the server will interact in this particular fashion, right? They'll interact in this particular fashion. Now, in case of a web application, okay, in case of a web application, this request is going, the response is coming, but how is this all happening? So it is happening because there is a rule. There is a rule that the client will communicate to the server and the server will communicate to the client in the form of HTTP protocol. So there are different protocols, guys. Basically, protocol is nothing but it is a rule or communication methodology between the client and the server. This server could be a database also. So for database, we normally have ODBC, JDBC, okay, database connections. Now, sometimes we have to transfer a file, let's say from one server to another. That is also transfer of data, right? For that, we have a protocol known as FTP, file transfer protocol. Okay, file transfer protocol. So similarly, for the web applications, okay, for the web applications, the normal form, okay, the normal form of protocol, the most common form of protocol used is the HTTP protocol. Okay, the normal form or the most common form of protocol used is the HTTP protocol. Any queries, anyone? Then load generator. You will hear another term in performance testing, load generator. Now what is a load generator? As I told you, in performance testing, we'll do the test with 1000 users, 2000 users, 5000 users. So basically more number of virtual users. Now when you are accessing the application functionally, you are launching your application on the browser. So that is your client, right? Now whenever you are doing the performance test, the request has to originate from somewhere, right? The request has to originate from somewhere and go to the server, because there will be no physical user and they will not access the application on the browser. So the performance testing tool will generate the load, will generate the users, and the request will be transferred from those users to the server. Now all these load creation, load injection, okay, creation of load, creation of the virtual users, and they trying to access the application, all these happen on the load generator machine. So here, instead of the client, I will have my load generator machine. I'll have my load generator machine. Okay, there will be a load generator machine. I'll write it as LG. So more frequently that LG term will be used, guys. Okay, so LG. Then from the LG, from the LG, the request will go, and at that time, we will not have this. Will not have this communication. Like there will be no client, right? During our performance test, there will be no browser. Okay, this LG machine will have either our JMeter tool or LoadRunner controller or NeoLoad. Okay, so basically the PT tool. The PT tool will be there in the LG machine, and then the request will go to the server. The response, will come back to the server. Clear, all of you? The response will come back from the server to the tool in the LG machine. Clear? This is how our execution will happen, and that will be done with the help of the load generator machine. From the load generator, the load will get injected to the server. Then we'll also hear the term like test script, test scenario. Test script is nothing but you will develop, okay, you will capture the transactions, the user flow, whatever is provided to you as a scope of your performance testing. Let's say registration of user, purchasing a product, modifying an order, cancelling the order, right? So whichever application you are testing, in that application whatever user transactions are there, they will be part of your performance testing scope. So they are these scenarios for you, test scenario. They are the test scenarios for you, and for those test scenarios you have to develop the test scripts. We do not write test cases. Performance testers, performance test engineers, they do not write test cases in Excel sheet or in any test management tool, guys. The performance testers develop test scripts. That is why it is a niche skill, also so much demanding in the market. Okay, and we develop test scripts. So the test script will be the flow, okay, or the test script will cover the user flow automatically. That is your test script, and test scenario are the list of user flows which will be in scope of your performance testing. Clear, all of you? Any queries from anyone on these terminologies? Any queries from anyone? Then we'll go to the next one, that is the life cycle of performance testing. Okay, what are the different phases in the performance testing life cycle? So they are requirement gathering, test plan and design, test execution, test results analysis, test reporting and sign off. So primarily these are the 5 phases in a performance testing life cycle. They can be applicable to a waterfall model of delivery. They can be applicable to one agile model of delivery. Okay, these phases will fit in any model. Clear, all of you? Requirement gathering, test plan and design, test execution, test results and analysis, test reporting and sign off. So we'll see the different activities being carried out in the requirement gathering phase. First, you will do the performance testing of an application. I'm sorry. You will do the performance testing of an application. So if you do not understand that application, if you do not understand what that application is about, how will you do the performance testing? So here I'm not saying that you have to know the entire functionality of the application. No, it is not like that. However, whatever scenarios are given to you, in order to understand them better, you should understand the application. Now, how will you do that? So in your project, there will be functional testing team members. You go and sit with them and ask them to make you understand the application. Go through the test cases documented by them. Go through the design documents. Go through the business requirement document, and you will be able to understand the application. So basically, if you are not able to understand, reach out to the different stakeholders like functional testing team, development team, solution architect, and try to get an application understanding. So if you understand the application also, you will be able to apply your thought process, your domain understanding. So based on that, you know, you can also advise to the project if you find that there are some there are no proper requirements for performance testing, or the requirements are not written correctly. So if you understand the application, and you can apply your experience and also suggest to the project stakeholders. Then guys, another important part or most important part of this requirement gathering phase is that you identify your scope. For your performance testing, what is going to be the scope? You need to identify that. Okay, what will be your scope? Scope means you have the application, right? You have the application. Now you are not going to do the performance testing of the entire application, guys. I'll tell you why. I'll explain that. Okay, you are not going to do the performance testing of the entire application. So we need to understand which all scenarios inside the application will be in our scope. That is first thing. You will be given non-functional requirements. You will be given non-functional requirements. So the non-functional requirements can be for performance testing, can be for security testing, can be for other non-functional testing. So for you, for performance testing, what are the NFRs? So non-functional requirements means NFRs. Okay. What are the NFRs which are applicable for performance testing? That also you have to identify. That also you have to identify. Right, guys? So basically, in order to identify the scope, you have to know which all scenarios will be in scope of performance testing. As I told you, you are not going to do the performance testing of the entire application. Now, in an application, you would have seen there are some modules like contact us, right? Contact us. How many people would be using that functionality? How many users would be using that functionality? Very less. Help, contact us, all those scenarios, they are not frequently used. So basically, the objective is that in an application, there can be so many scenarios in the application. But performance testing means doing the test with considerable load for a particular duration of time. Now, if some functionality is going to be accessed by a low volume of users in production, why is the performance testing required for that scenario? Are you able to understand me? That is why in performance testing terminologies, you will get an interview question. You will get an interview question. How will you determine? How will you determine which scenarios will be in scope of your performance testing? Very important question. How will you determine which scenarios will be in scope of your performance testing? You need to say that the frequently used scenarios. So the scenarios which are going to be frequently used by the users in production, they are going to be a candidate for performance testing. Mission critical means for fulfilling the business, for fulfilling that user flow, or for fulfilling the important transactions, for completing the important transactions. Those scenarios are very much necessary. Those scenarios are very much critical. So that is why those scenarios can be called as mission critical. So the kind of scenarios which are mission critical for the application, they will also be performance testing candidates. Now you will tell, how do I know which scenario is mission critical or not? That is where you have to get in touch with your business analyst, business users, because they are the best person to advise you that. If you have vast experience in that particular domain, you can also suggest that which scenarios are going to be frequently used. However, it is always recommended to have that view from the business users. They are the best person who can recommend you that which scenarios are going to be frequently used in production, which scenarios are mission critical for the application. So if anyone asks you in the interview, how do you determine which scenarios will be in scope of performance testing? Hope you can answer now. So during these training sessions, we'll also be discussing the interview questions, guys. So whichever topic is being covered, if there are any questions to be covered, so that is also going to be covered during the training. That is what I had also told in the demo session. Next, you need to have the finalized and approved version of NFRs. What is NFR? Non-functional requirement. So which NFR you are going to test, which NFR is going to be in your scope, you need to discuss, you need to go, first of all you will go through the non-functional requirements. Okay, you will go through the non-functional requirements and you will analyze those non-functional requirements. Okay, you will go through the non-functional requirements, you will analyze those non-functional requirements. If you find that there is any gap in the non-functional requirements, there is any gap in the non-functional requirements, you will ask the business analyst team with the details and you will ask them to resolve those issues. Resolve those issues. Clear, all of you? So the non-functional requirements need to be finalized, need to be approved. If they are not approved and they are further changed later in the life cycle, then you would have already designed your test scripts, you would have already documented your test plan, and then if there is change in the NFR, it is again going to be a problem for you, right? So always remember that try to have the finalized version of NFRs, finalized version of scenarios for your scope. That should be your target in the requirement gathering phase. Okay, in the requirement gathering phase, that should be your target to get them finalized, get them approved. So once you get the NFRs, analyze them. If you find there are any gaps, you go and tell the business analyst that these issues needs to be resolved and ask them to give you the finalized approved version of NFRs. Okay. The points which you should look out for in the NFRs is like if they have given you the average load, peak load or not, if they have given you the expected response time or not, if they have given you the failure rate or not. Like let's say out of all the transactions, if there is any acceptable failure limit like 2%, 3% of the total scenarios or total transactions. Clear? Then if there is any TPS, transactions per second target mentioned or not. Okay, so this kind of details you need to check for in the NFRs. If they are missing, raise it to the business analyst. Also, you need to request for a test environment, performance test environment. Okay, whom you will place that request with? You will place that request with the environment team in your project. Okay, and then they will liaise with the other stakeholders in order to procure if required and provide you the environment. Okay, you should place the request for the performance test environment with the environment team. Now what should be the performance testing environment specifications, guys? The performance testing environment specifications should be close to production. It should be close to production, means similar to production. Whatever is the number of CPU cores in production, same should be there in performance testing environment. RAM, whatever is there, or the memory, whatever is there in production, that should be present in performance testing environment. Why, guys? Why? Someone will ask you why. Why do you need a performance testing environment close to production? That question can come in the project. That question can come in an interview also. Your answer should be that in performance testing, we are simulating the production scenarios with the production volumetric. Now, if I have a lower specification environment, whatever results I will get, they will not resemble to production. I cannot correlate that to production. Means I cannot say that whatever results I am getting in the performance test environment, I'll get the same results in production environment, because both the environments are different. I need to have an apple to apple comparison if I can compare the metrics. But in my case, if the environments are itself different, if the specification of the environments are different, how can I compare the results from both the environments? That is why you should ask for a performance test environment which is close to production in configuration. Clear, all of you? Any queries on any of the activities in requirement gathering phase? These are the major activities which needs to be carried out in the requirement gathering phase. Now, when there are different activities happening in a project, there will definitely be different challenges. In interviews also, you will be asked what are the different challenges which you have faced, right? So in project, there are always challenges which we need to face and resolve. So the most common challenges, okay, and I'm not writing it all of them, the most common ones, okay, which you will see in a requirement gathering phase are, most of the times you will be asking for the finalized scope, means finalized list of scenarios and finalized list of NFRs, but you won't get it. Many times it happens. Many times it happens that you will not get the finalized scope, you will not get the finalized list of NFRs. That is a challenge which you have to overcome in the project, guys. You have to follow up, you have to ask for it. Okay, but that is a challenge. In most of the performance testing projects, the finalized scope, the NFRs are not available. But as performance testing engineers, you have to follow up and get it. Test environment availability. Many times the performance test environment which is close to production is not available. The project will say that no, we do not have a test environment close to production. We cannot create one as well because it is going to incur a lot of cost to our project. What will you do in that case? Will you simply sit down? No. In that case, you need to raise the risk to the project. You need to call it out clearly that if you're not getting a performance testing environment close to the production, then what is your challenge going to be? How it is going to be a problem to the project? Proper performance testing cannot be done. Correct performance testing results cannot be obtained. As a result, proper forecast, or you cannot uh, call it out like how the application performance will be in production. Clear? So that is your responsibility Go to the project, tell them clearly these are the challenges if we do not get the test environment, and as a result there will be risks to the project. Okay, how the application will behave in production we will never be able to know until and unless it has gone to production. But without proper performance testing, if we send the application to the production, we are taking a huge risk. Clear, all of you? Some of the challenges which I have told, and the activities also we discussed about requirement gathering. Anyone having any queries? Anyone having any queries? Okay. So with this, we'll close this session for today, and then we will go to the next phase in the next session, the test plan and design phase. So thank you for joining the call.